You're watching Faith and Reason, a discussion about God, politics, and pop culture. From the perspective of our pastors, who are not afraid to tackle and ask the hard questions. A Christian talk show for those on a spiritual journey. This is Faith and Reason.
Good evening. Welcome to Faith and Reason, a program that looks at issues that are going on in today's society in light of the Word of God. I'm Pastor George Crespo of First Baptist Church in Cliffside Park. With us this evening is Brother Russo, Franciscan monk, who works in a number of parishes, and also, of course, Pastor Rick Spence from Fort Lee Gospel, our co-host here as always. Thank God. And tonight we want to, we're heading into the Christmas season. And we decided to tackle one topic in particular, and that was the whole tradition of St. Nicholas and how St. Nick became Santa Claus. And so we're going to dive right into that topic and learn as much as possible we can about this man named Bishop Nicholas. So first of all, Brother Russo, tell us about Nicholas. Who was he? Where? What time? What period? Details about him.
Born in 274.
Okay.
And he was born to a rich family, and not particularly with Nicholas. He was in a Christian family, but their whole approach was they enjoyed their wealth. But Nicholas, who received the gospel and was so enthralled with the gospel as being real, that he tried to imitate the idea of the generosity and the kindness, and gave away a lot of property and money for Christians, especially the relief of orphans and widows. And one of the great customs that we have today from him is that he would put a few coins in a little bag and throw it through an open window to redeem the young virgins, not to be auctioned off, and to save the poor families. And basically, he would do this most of the time anonymously. But at some point, because of his Christian preaching of the gospel, he was imprisoned, as many Christians were, under the Emperor Diocletian. And he was taken away from his flock. But even in the prison, he preached Jesus Christ in the Gospels. And at some point, he was freed and returned to the church in which they had a great reverence for the child Jesus, the baby Jesus. And the people flocked to him because he was a holy man and a learned man. But even with all his holiness, he showed his character and strength at the Council of Nicaea in 325, in which a bishop named Arius said that Jesus was not God, he was just a man. And after all the debates and all the discussions and all the scriptures, Nicholas went up to him and slapped him, saying, "Not only are you not worthy to be a bishop, you're not even a Christian." And so he had this character which is very contrary to this jolly ho 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 bowl of jelly belly. And so he had a dynamic character, and he is a bridge between the East and Western Church. We both celebrate December 6th, which was yesterday, as his universal feast celebration.
Yeah, just a little more details about his life. He was Greek. He was
Greek.
And he ended up in what is modern-day Turkey. Myra is the city, so he's Bishop of Myra. And he spent some time in around Jerusalem, Bethlehem area as well as a younger believer. And like you say, again, the challenge of reading into his life story is that there's a lot of fable mixed with truth. Yes. So you've got some, definitely a lot of extra stories picked up, and the whole Santa Claus connection makes it worse, in terms of what is true, what is myth.
He wouldn't recognize himself.
Right. But clearly he was someone who was from a rich family, as you said. He was somebody who was actually raised by his uncle, who was also named Nicholas. Apparently, that's in the story, and he became a leader of the church. He became a bishop of Myra, which is Turkey today, and he was involved in an important council which dealt with it. And just for clarity, you made reference to Arius, but people would miss the fact that that's the heresy that the Jehovah's Witnesses have picked up on.
Oh, yes.
So the Arius doctrine became the doctrine of the Jehovah's Witness, that Jesus was not God, there was just Jehovah, and Jesus was not the Son of God in the way we understand it.
Actually, no, he's the creation of God according to
Creation
Arius.
of God,
Yeah.
exactly.
A creature.
And he was influential, and like you say, he slapped or punched him in the face, whatever.
We say slapped. We don't.
One source said he punched him in the face.
could be.
But either way, he was a feisty defender of truth
Yes,
as
that's
he
right,
came
yes.
down on the right side of history. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the only incident ever mentioned of him doing anything
Right.
that was violent. And I'm sure, we forget. Well, I guess if you watch certain maybe business meetings or where people get heated, it got heated because it was an ongoing debate back and forth, and Arius was relentless, as was the other side as well. But I guess there's just moments where your flesh takes over. Now you mentioned the myths, the stories that have build up around Nicholas. Now, obviously, the Santa Claus is a big one. We're going to get to that in a second. But what other stories?
There's a
what
real
other fables?
horrific fable about him is that he restored to life 3 little children that were turned into sausages, and that he prayed over the
I'm
sausages,
serious. I read the same
and they
story.
returned back to
returned
being
back to
living
life.
children.
Yes,
and
yes.
I saw at St. Nicholas in Palisade Park, my younger days, a little
Lord.
tub with 3 children jumping out towards St. Nicholas, and I said, "What's that about?" When the priest explained it to me, I was hysterical laughing
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it's absurd.
And that's clearly one. And there's a recent article or scholarly work on his life that basically said that's probably one in the category of fiction.
Probably.
It probably did not happen that way.
But you see, he defended it because he said these children were Italian. That was
Okay.
turned to sausages.
Yeah. Oh, that's
No, but I mean, the story was that and it has different versions. These are a lot of
yes.
middle-aged stories, like 800 years after his death.
Yes.
But stories of, either 3 adults killed or 3 boys, children killed, and they were to be turned into sausages or meat to be served, meat pie, whatever it's, and so that's we'll categorize that as fiction, and we'll.
How else do you frighten children in the Middle Ages?
That's right.
They showed them a
Nicholas will get
sausage.
you.
Yeah, that's right. And the other one that you made reference to, and that is, and this may be, it's a likely true story where because Nicholas had some resources and because a dowry was important for young girls, there was a poor family, had 3 daughters, and nobody knows if he did 3 bags of gold on the same night or 3 different
That's right,
nights,
yes.
or when they came of age, they turned 15 or whatever the age was, and then he dropped a bag of gold through the window anonymously. So that's certainly that's a story that's. Matter of fact, one of the versions is the father was looking out, who is this anonymous donor by the 3rd time?
Oh, yes.
And so he dropped it through the chimney and it landed in the sock. Which
that's
is,
a
of course,
modern-
let's call that fiction for now. But the idea of
Absolutely,
him,
yes.
dropping. But that's the nature of this, 4th century. That's, 300, and he died in 343.
47.
Okay, well,
have
I've got 270 to 343, but
Okay,
you could
I'll go
you
with
could
yours.
go with
No, no.
270. And again, listen, even the dates are up for debate, but the generation and the fact that he was a bishop of a church is concrete. That's real.
Any other stories, or are those 2 major?
At least the colors of his clothing, the bishop often wore a red mantle over a white tunic. So we can see the transition of the red and white into the various.
Santa Claus. I think the other one, and he's also known as a bishop of sailors.
Yes.
And so there's some stories which may be based in some truth where he's on a boat and the big storm comes up and they're fearing for their life. They had him pray. Matter of fact, one of the versions is that one of the sailors falls overseas and basically is drowned. And he prays, and the sailor is revived to life. or whether it was just him praying for the storm and it calms down and they made it through.
Several versions of that.
Yeah, versions of the same story. But it's so he's become a patron saint of sailors.
Yes.
That's one of the places, not just of children, of sailors. There's different versions. Even I think prisoners as well, right? He's a patron saint of prisoners.
Obviously, he becomes connected eventually, of course, with Christmas.
Right.
Can you tell us how that transition occurred? How, brother, how did he go from being Saint Nick, or being this bishop, to being associated with Christmas?
Well, he had a great reverence for the child Jesus, and his shrine, or his church rather, there was an icon of the child Jesus. Mm-hmm. So whether that's legend also, but they said that he had a great affinity to that. There was no celebration in the early church of what we understand as Christmas. They were more concentrated on the death, resurrection, and ascension than any nativity. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had the gospel there, but they sort of like took John's approach. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He completely doesn't even emphasize the cave and the people and the scenes and the shepherds and the angels and all those things. But there was this great reverence that he had for, he preached on something, the great preaching on the incarnation, which is God taking flesh, Jesus Christ. And so because of that, there was an association.
And he was a bishop at the time that Christians began the Christmas tradition. The idea of Constantine, becoming, bringing Christianity into the Roman Empire as the Roman emperor. So he took the pagan holidays of the winter solstice, so to speak, and he brought out the birth of Jesus. Most scholars would argue, December 25th is not Jesus' birthday. He was probably born in the spring, as opposed to the middle of the winter. And yet, Nicholas would have been the bishop at the time that Christmas was begun. Obviously, nothing near what we celebrate it as. And so there's a connection there. He had a connection to Bethlehem in his own journeys, and it was in a monastery in the area of Bethlehem. So, a couple of these things sort of pick up some steam.
But there were no Christmas trees.
No Christmas trees.
Well, we're going to take a small break, and when we come back, we're going to see the connection, how Saint Nick makes it to the U.S. and becomes Santa Claus. First this. Welcome back to Faith and Reason. You saw a clipping there for Fort Lee Gospel. We certainly invite you to go there if you're near in the neighborhood and worship there. I'm pastor of the First Baptist Church in Cliffside Park. We're at 777 Anderson Avenue, and our service is at 10 a.m. We have Sunday school. 11 a.m. we have our worship service. Also Wednesday night we have a prayer meeting at 7:30 p.m. Where we study the Word of God and then head into prayer. We do have a website, firstbaptistcp.org, where you can hear the messages, you can get information about our church. Brother Russo, tell us about your congregations.
St. Anthony's, Union City, where I've been for 24 years. Lector, Eucharistic minister, 10 o'clock Mass regularly, occasionally on special occasions and holy days. My joy is a diverse ministry, so diverse that I'm at Pastor Rick's Bible study for 5 years now on Tuesdays, and I recommend it. Very good.
Yeah, thank you. No comment. No, but thank you.
No, hold up on that one.
Yeah. No, it's been a pleasure. And we actually have a Bible study with a Tuesday lunch, which includes people from a few different churches. And we have some lively discussions at times. And Brother David is an important part of that group. Thank you.
Well, we're talking about Bishop Nicholas, and how he became Santa Claus. And of course, the big thing here is in the U.S. And so you can tell us maybe the genesis, how it came to the U.S. and how it developed, how did it become this incredible...
Well, St. Nicholas even had a genesis of his body was taken for safety reasons from Myra to Bari, Italy, where his body is now entombed. And so the modern understanding is they call him St. Nicholas da Bari, of Bari. Why? But that's because where his body is. And so even early on, many Christians did from early times save the relics or the bodies of the saints from desecration. and that's why we have the catacombs too, for safety reasons. But the development, as was earlier said, of miracles and various other things, some of them had their roots, but the idea of Christmas and the Nativity definitely came for his great love of the incarnation, Jesus becoming flesh.
Okay.
Yeah,
How does he become
yeah,
Santa in the U.S.?
I mean, this is, a 2-minute version of it is that Nicholas was developed into some form of a Santa Claus or Saint Nick in various European cultures, whether it be the German or France or the Father Christmas of England.
Yes.
So that there was a little bit of a takeoff from him, the idea of giving gifts. And then, of course, as European immigrants came to this country, it wasn't really solidified. And I would say a very important turning point for Santa Claus as we know him today was the poem was "The Night Before Christmas, all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." And we all grew up with that. But that was from 1823. I mean, one of the things I remember as a young minister, and I'm still young, but when I was real young, as a young minister, I was almost, kind of looked at Santa Claus in a negative light. He's taking the spotlight off of Jesus. We're about Jesus, and there's some truth to that discussion. But if you look at it historically, Santa Claus really brought Christmas, from almost like a Halloween kind of celebration on the streets, revelry. Here we go, wassailing, which was, demanding things from houses, and the revelry of Christmas, and all the violence and the youth uproar and all that kind of stuff. Santa Claus brought Christmas into the home, and it made it about giving gifts to children. And so in many ways, Santa Claus can be, given credit for making Christmas, really the family wholesome event it's become. And a lot of it had to do was the night before Christmas. It was a real turning point in our country, at least.
Well, Daniel Borstein, in his book, The American Experience, has a section there where he deals Santa Claus. And recalling what he said there, because I realized I don't have the books. I must have lent somebody and they never gave them back to me. But he dealt with the idea of the consumer nation that we became and are becoming worse and worse. He got into a whole discussion about, we became the Sears catalog type people, where before they would tell you, to buy things were very individualized, but now you could buy socks, and here was one sock fits all type, and Santa Claus became part of that, where they realized they were trying to use him to get people to purchase, get the Christmas cards, get the Christmas gifts, do the tree, do this, more embellishments and greater embellishments. But it was part, unfortunately, of the consumer nation, which we see today.
Absolutely.
It's just out of control. It's just it's amazing how people will be willing to put themselves in debt for Christmas to give out gifts.
And if you're in business, you love Christmas. It's
yes.
And it doesn't matter what your religion is, but Christmas is great for the bottom line of people selling things in our country.
Sure.
And it's a big part of our economy. But that's, again, and we can debate that. I think we're way overboard with consumerism, and certainly that's a part of it. And as Christians, you say, well, we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ and the reason for the season, and all of those kind of themes are important to remind people.
So Santa has changed a lot. Any further new developments on the Santa myth?
Well, I saw him on television with a sports car that was a red instead of a sleigh.
He's getting modernized.
Yeah.
I got a kick out of a story last week where there's you can go get your picture with Santa and your pet. Dogs and cats. One place you can, and I won't even say where you do it because that's I don't want to promote that. But here it is. People take their dog or their cat or their lizard, whatever, and they take it to a place where there's a pet Santa Claus, and so you get your picture taken and you mail that out for Christmas.
Wow.
And that's that's first for me this year. Maybe it happened last year and I missed it, but but it's a new one, I think, and. It's it continues to be the idea of Santa and consumerism. It's a big part of it.
So here's the thing now. Of course, the bottom line for us is people of God. How does Santa Claus and Jesus How does this relate? Is this good? Is this bad? In what ways?
One of my favorite depictions of St. Nicholas, of Santa Claus, is him with his hat off, kneeling in front of the baby Jesus, which I used to have, and I gave it away to a Christian family. And is, come let us adore him. And in seeing that this is the real meaning of Christmas. But all the other things, such as even the great Christmas trees, this is a pagan from the Teutonic German tribes of hanging emblems in a sacred oak grove, that the trees, and they would venerate them by putting symbols and various petitions of some form, that the tree became that. But the early Christians had an understanding that, like the gospel, the tree was evergreen, even in the wintertime. So they incorporated it in. Unfortunately, sometimes the tree would take the center stage instead of the reason for the season, Jesus.
Amen to all of that, and I would add as well that when you think about Christmas and Santa Claus, I think you're going between the difference between the goodwill of the season, which I think Santa Claus is a kindly, it's a make the children smile, a jolly kind of character we've created. Versus the reason for the season, which is on the calendar, we're remembering the birth of Jesus Christ. We're remembering that Jesus was born fully God, fully man. And I just, as a minister, I just look at it as an opportunity every Christmas season to say, you're going to hear Santa Claus 6 days a week, but when you come to church, we're going to focus on Jesus. We're going to focus on, the history of the birth of Jesus, why that's important. Some faith lessons that come out of the reality of the various Christmas accounts or birth of Jesus accounts, and so that's where instead of like the one church that had a image of Santa Claus in the front and they lit it on fire, and that's foolishness. You don't. It is what it is, and we need to bring the story of the birth of Jesus into play as well.
But it is a sense, I guess, in a real sense, just as a pagan holiday was made into Christmas, that there are pagans trying to make it back into paganism. Sure. And they want to, de-emphasize Christ as much as possible. Because now when people talk about a Christmas scene, you'll see Santa. You'll see it, even I'm shocked when I see towns do that, because I'm like, they don't do that for Hanukkah and stuff like that. But for their representation of Christmas is Santa Claus and the tree, and no Jesus.
Right.
When really Christmas should be Jesus. Yeah, just like Hanukkah, you're going to put a Hanukkah, you're not going to put something else that can replace it, or for Ramadan or for whatever it is, you're not going to replace it. But it's been a repaganization of Christendom.
Can I give a positive shout out to Fort Lee that they've done, and this is actually, we're in the first day of Hanukkah as we're taping this program, but right in the center of Fort Lee, the corner of Lemoyne and Main Street is a creche with Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus, and on the other side is a Hanukkah statue, and to my knowledge, I haven't heard of an uprising against that. I think it's a tribute to the town that they've allowed that to coexist. I'm sure there's some.
Was there a sign that says "Shop locally," though?
No. But this is, again, it's not a Christmas tree, and I've been in town long enough that I remember there was they were raising money to buy, because Mary is this tall, and so it's a sizable. It was a big investment, maybe $1,000 investment originally.
I tell you, I grew up in a neighborhood where it was primarily Latinos, but of course it was the Italians were there first. I didn't know what a Hanukkah thing was at all. First time I saw it next to Jesus, I was like, "What is that? What is that candlestick have to?" I mean, I was completely oblivious as a child what this could be, and I was not exposed to it at all.
Right.
There was nothing in school where they would teach you. I mean, we were taught about Christmas. We hear things about Christ, but we never heard about other traditions like that.
But Jesus himself would acknowledge Hanukkah. As it says, he went up to the temple for the Festival of Lights. He would be confused if he wasn't God to see how we're celebrating his birth, in some cases.
Yeah. Obviously, like you said, the birth of Christ is not the the primary focus of the early church. The primary focus is the death and resurrection of Christ. That is the real focus. But obviously, this became part of tradition, trying to replace something else, and we have to be careful what comes in that might be more mythological than anything else.
But the interest was there. The early church had a lot of problems with Gnostic writings on the early childhood, such as Thomas, the gospel, pseudo-gospel of Thomas, where they speak of the early childhood of Jesus. So there was a great interest in the early church, too.
Which is ironic coming from Gnostics who were so anti-physical, but shows the contradictions they have within themselves.
But they got an audience with it.
Yeah. But it was very much compared to the same mythology as Nicholas,
Yes.
Putting children to death, bringing little birds, little clay birds to life. Really weird, really weird stuff.
He claps.
Not like nativity. So the reaction of the church should be positive, negative?
Well, I think we as a church, a couple things, in the Christmas season, you come to church, you sing Christmas hymns as opposed to Santa Claus is coming to town. We actually, you being Franciscan, we have a little creche, even in the church. We used to have a Christmas tree, and over the years we said, why not have a nativity scene instead? And that goes back to Saint Francis himself.
Yes.
He was the first one in a largely illiterate population, said, let's put together the images to tell the story.
Real people. And real animals.
Yeah. And we don't do real animals. That's living in Fort Lee. That's not happening.
Not a good idea.
And by the way, go out to Lancaster. They do a great Christmas program out at Sight and Sound in Lancaster with real animals, and even the Radio City Music Christmas Spectacular. If you've ever gone to that, they do all the myths of Christmas from Santa Claus to. And then they end with the nativity story, and so this is the real meaning, which is wonderful.
But I advocate that people go to church for Christmas and keep going.
And keep going, right.
Yeah. Well, we have about 1 minute up, so wrap up. Any last thoughts? Any words of exhortation and encouragement?
I always reach out to people, and not just with Merry Christmas. I like to say, have a good Christmas. And if someone says I'm Jewish, I say, have a good Hanukkah. So that we're not put in this thing where we're forbidden to celebrate Christmas as Christians.
Yeah. Amen. Well, we hope that you enjoyed our show. It was educational, learning more about the tradition. And of course, as Christians, our focus is Christ. And as Brother David told us, he's the real reason for the season. God bless you. Enjoy your Christmas.
Amen.
Thank you for watching Faith and Reason.